What's going on, readers? My name is AG and welcome back to my channel. This time I'm going to be bringing you the review for Into the Dark by Claudia Grey. This book came out February 2nd, 2021, 1 month after Light of the Jedi. Also released at the height of the COVID pandemic, which I will be talking about in my final thoughts. This book is also the first of the young adult novels in the High Republic series. This book is written by Claudia Grey, who I'm sure needs no introduction, as she's known as the queen of canon in the Star Wars book universe. She's written some fantastic books such as Master and Apprentice, Lost Stars, Bloodlines, and of course Leia, Princess of Alderaan. Just like last time, I'm going to break down my review into 3 parts. I want to talk about the plot and the pacing of this book, as well as the characters and what worked for me and what really didn't. And with that, let's get right into The Dark. This novel tells the story of Reese Silas, a Jedi Padawan who's sent on a mission an assignment to the frontier of space. And on his way there, the ship he's traveling gets kicked out of hyperspace because of the events of Light of the Jedi. And him and 3 other Jedi and 3 of the crew members aboard the vessel is what it's called, find an abandoned space station and decide to land there because they're not sure how long they're not going to be able to use hyperspace. As they get to the ship though, things start to happen, like visions of the dark side of the Force, and they find some strange idols, and they start to find signs of things that have happened on the ship to make it abandoned, and so they start to investigate what really happened. Without giving spoilers away, the plot does hint that it's more complicated than it turns out being. But that doesn't mean that the main story itself isn't satisfying, but it can feel underwhelming. The plot can be broken down into 3 semi-connected parts. First, we have Reith's story, that is the story of uncovering the mystery of the space station, as well as the group of people that land there with them. There's more to them than meets the eye, and they do play a bigger part in the High Republic era. But I don't want to give that away here. Then there is Affy's story, a crew member of the vessel, and her uncovering this mystery of a conspiracy between the company she works for and her family aboard the station. And the last is the 2 older Jedi that are accompanying them on this mission with Master Comac Vitus and Orla Jareni, as they are trying to find out what these visions of the dark side of the Force mean and what these idols mean. Honestly, the 2 younger protagonist stories with Reith and Affy are the most enjoyable parts of the book. They are a little bit predictable, but they are pretty good. The story of the 2 older Jedi can sometimes hold the book back. The story doesn't fit all the way sometimes and can feel like it's just added onto it to add some more content. Specifically, when the story of them shifts from present day to 25 years ago when they went on their very first mission together. This part of the story, in my opinion, could have been cut and would have made the pacing of their plot more enjoyable. The scenes from the past are so spread out that it felt jarring sometimes for them to pop back up, and you would be forgiven for thinking that you were reading another book sometimes. Now I want to talk about the characters. There are a few characters in this book that really save it for me and help me get through parts I didn't necessarily like as much. Because, when Claudia Grey has an idea for a character and a personality, it really shows. Reith is the very first Jedi that I've ever felt connected to. He just wants to stay on Coruscant and study in the archives and research things that might come up later, which does happen in the book later on. And I also like that he's not sure of himself. Not in a doubtful way, more of an overthinking way. I found that really relatable and endearing, and that's why he is the standout for me. All of the crew of the vessel are very interesting. Affy, being the female protagonist, does get the most amount of page time, and I do believe her character felt very believable. And while I didn't always agree with the way that she handled things, I do felt that her growth towards the end of the book was earned. I also loved the 2 other members of the vessel. Leox gives me a shaggy, go with the flow kind of guy. I enjoyed his interactions with the others, and I did enjoy his parental relationship with Affy. And I can't forget to talk about the main man, Geode, who is basically a rock. And I love everything about it. The way it's written is so funny that it would actually make me laugh out loud to a point I would feel silly. In the scenes that he's in, it's just so interesting the way that they would write a rock, because Leox would be talking to him, and in the scene it's just him and Geode standing there talking. But Geode doesn't talk since he's a rock. So it would be written like, Geode's silence let Leox knew that he didn't agree with what he was thinking. And I thought it was super funny, and I enjoyed it every time he was on the page. And the last characters rounding out the ensemble are the group of 3 Jedi that are along on the mission. Are Master Comac, Orla Jareni, and Des Rydan. I have very polarizing opinions about this group. Let's start with the good. I really enjoyed Des and his relationship with Reeth. Them coming from the same master gave them a connection that you could see. I liked him okay, even if what happens to him is very predictable after an incident that happened in the beginning of the book on the station. Master Comac I felt was a cool character and had some personality, but he was definitely an older Jedi just facing some trauma from the past. He kind of reminded me of Baylan Skoll mixed with an older version of Luke. It was a welcome addition, but sometimes I felt he added nothing to the plot other than to say he had to go meditate. And lastly, my least favorite has to be Orla Jareni. While I do really dig her design, and when she was introduced, I was super excited because she's this wayfinder who doesn't agree with the Jedi Order, she turned out to be the most bland of the bunch. Things would just happen in the book, and she wouldn't really have a reaction. She was the most neutral character that I've ever read in a story. Which I felt was really odd because she ended up being the one that talked the most during interactions with the group. I just hope in future novels her character gets more development. While I didn't hate her, I didn't really get a lot to make me want to like her either, so let's see what she looks like in the future. This novel, she didn't work well for me. Alright, let's talk about 3 things that really worked for me and 3 things that really didn't. Reese's character was something in a Star Wars story that I didn't know that I wanted. Being able to relate to a Jedi has been somewhat hard for me with the new canon. It feels like that a Jedi is either this divine person who can do all things, or they are on the verge of toppling over to the dark side. So it was really nice just to see a Jedi who was a regular person. Second, the found family dynamic of the crew of the vessel I found really enjoyable. In most scenes that they were interacting with each other, you could feel that behind the words on the page, there were years and years of relationships built up. Plus, Geode. Geode needs to appear in more things down the road. I cannot get enough of this character. Lastly, there is a cameo at the end of this book that I don't want to spoil, that while it didn't add much to the plot, it did put a big smile on my face, and I was super excited to see them. Now I want to talk about what really didn't work for me. Well, number one scene right after the halfway point of the book where Reeth is talking to the Jedi Council about suspicions that the Nihil are going to take over that station and to use it for their terror, and the Jedi Council decide to do nothing about it. And I thought that was really odd and disconnected. We already found out in Light of the Jedi that the Council decided to take out the Nihil. So for them to say they're not going to do anything about the Nihil taking over a space station that's rich in the dark side and fully powered just felt really weird to me. Second off, just like in Light of the Jedi, there were actually 2 scenes this time that talked about sex. And just like last time, it felt really out of place, not only for the scene that it's happening in, but for the entire book, and so I didn't like it very much, but that's just my opinion. And lastly, my biggest problem from the book comes from the plot 25 years ago between Master Comac and Orla Jareni. I truly believe that if this subplot was taken out entirely, or if maybe it was a conversation between the two in the beginning of the book, that it might have felt more focused and might have been more interesting than it actually ended up being. Overall, I have really split opinions about this book. On one hand, I see a novel that was written by an amazing author, that was written at the time of the pandemic with COVID, and you can see that there are connections to things that were happening outside in the real world that were going on in the book, and they totally made sense, and the way that they're written, the characters face problems that we were facing, and it was super clever and very fitting for the Star Wars world, with some fascinating and memorable characters that really made me want to learn more about them and to get ready for the next adventure. On the other hand, I see this novel that has an interesting setup with Force artifacts and corporate conspiracies and an abandoned space station that feels really underwhelming by the time the final pages are done. And it's held up by a flashback plot that is not paced very well, some characters that don't feel distinct, and the feeling that the enemy that they're facing is not as important as it is in Light of the Jedi. I rate things on a page scale of 1 to 5 pages, and this book is going to get a 3 out of 5 pages from me. While there is enough here that is interesting for a first-time read, there is not enough for me to want to come back and want to reread it again. but that's just my opinion. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel for more videos like it. Also, comment down below what you thought of this book. I'd love to hear what you would rate this. Once again, my name is AG, and until next time, stay reading.